Hi everybody, it's Honest John. This morning Darrell Issa held hearings on the attack at the consulate in Benghazi. And going into the hearings, he and other GOP representatives promised this was going to be big. They were going to blow the lid off the scandal and cover up by the Obama administration. And so, when I got up this morning, all the news outlets were covering the hearings. But time went by and nothing happened, and then the three ladies who had been kidnapped in Cleveland had their homecoming, so the news switched to coverage of that. And then they started talking about other things, and then the Jodi Arias verdict came in. She was found guilty, if you don't know. And so Issa and his cohorts were regulated to C-SPAN. And so there they have their small audience of political wonks. And so the poor Republicans didn't get to strut their stuff before their base, because let's face it, you're not going to find any Tea Partiers watching C-SPAN. Well, and it turned out that the hearings got about all the coverage they deserved, because nothing was happening. They didn't uncover any new information. The bombshell did not go off, and it was pretty much a dud. Now, the situation in Benghazi was a massive screw-up by the Obama administration. The embassy, more should have been done, not consulate, not embassy, consulate. More should have been done to protect it before the attacks. And then afterwards, their handling of it was, to put it kindly, inept. But see, we all know that stuff. You know, the Republicans insist there's something deeper, darker, more sinister going on. And yet, they keep having these hearings and they can't find anything. That's because we already know they screwed up. If they were covering up, they did a bad job of covering that up. I don't see how the Obama administration could look any worse than they did as far as Benghazi is concerned. But see, Issa and his Republican cohorts, they see conspiracies everywhere. The problem is the Republican congressmen can't seem to get it through their heads that stuff that they learned from Matt Drudge and Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh and the various other, Alex Jones, the various other right-wing idiots, that these are a bunch of paranoid nutcases. And what is fed to the public on their radio shows is their delusions. Right after the Boston Marathon. Now what happened was that there was a Saudi student who was in the hospital, one of the hospitals. He was slightly injured in the bombing, and the police questioned him. Turned out he had nothing to do with the bombing, but as they were investigating him, they learned that he wasn't in compliance with his visa. He wasn't carrying enough credits at school that were required by the visa. So they referred the case over to the INS. Now, what this became in the right-wing blogosphere was the Obama cover-up, that they were going to whisk this guy away from Boston to Saudi Arabia in order to prevent him from being questioned about the Boston bombing. Glenn Beck came on his radio show and said that he had secret information, which if the Obama administration didn't come clean, he was going to reveal it on his Monday program. But then reality intervened and the Boston bombers were caught. And the next time Beck went on the air, it appeared he'd forgotten all about that secret information he had. Never brought it up. Of course, his listeners, they were not bright enough to notice that. And one of Beck's regular listeners is Congressman Representative Jeff Duncan from South Carolina. Because he brought Beck's paranoid fantasy into the Congress, and he bought it hook, line, and sinker. And he even questioned Janet Napolitano about it in a hearing. And finally, she just told him she wasn't going to answer his questions anymore. She stopped just short of calling him a fucking idiot. Now, the latest right-wing conspiracy is that the Obama administration is buying up all the ammunition in an effort to subvert the Second Amendment. They're buying all the ammunition to keep it away from the American people. Now, once again, this is just a paranoid delusion. This one comes from Alex Jones. And the rumor is that DHS has bought about 2 billion rounds of ammunition in order to keep it from us. And also that the DHS is buying 27 tanks. Now, the fact is, it's the Marine Corps that's buying the tanks, and they're not all tanks. It's tanks and armored vehicles, total of 27, which is kind of what you'd expect the Marine Corps to do. And as for DHS, well, they do buy a lot of ammunition, and they buy it in bulk because that saves money, but nowhere near a billion. Currently, the DHS is contracted to buy about 350 million rounds of various types of ammunition over the next 5 years. Nowhere near 2 billion. Matter of fact, the total amount of government purchases of ammunition is about 11% of the total bought. Now, gun owners are complaining about shortages of ammunition. So what's causing that? Well, according to the gun manufacturers, it's the gun owners. Every time the right gins up fears about the government coming to take their weapons, the paranoid gun nuts flood the gun shops and start stockpiling ammunition. Now, these guys are so crazy and stupid that they shouldn't be allowed to own anything more dangerous than a butter knife. But those suckers, they just fall for that shit every time. But now we have members of Congress pushing legislation to limit the amount of ammunition the government can buy. And if their bill had any chance of passing, the law enforcement would be relegated to about 900 rounds of ammunition a year. A year. Now, these are our elected officials. And they have staffs. And they could have asked their staffs to do the fact-checking like I did and found out what was really going on. But instead, they chose to believe Alex Jones and Glenn Beck and nutcases like that. You know, the rumor has been going around that the government's going to come for everybody's guns since the start of the Republic. And yet, they still haven't gotten around to it. So you have to ask, who's crazier? The right-wing, wingnut talk show hosts like Jones and Beck and Rush Limbaugh and all those other crazies? Or the Tea Party congressmen like Jeff Duncan, James Inhofe, Ted Cruz, and Rand Paul who choose to believe them? Or the dumbass people that vote for them? Thanks for listening.